You might think my story of having a baby at 47 has nothing to do with your young life, but let me tell you how every part of it does. I bought into friends with benefits. I did what's called dating beneath myself. That's what my best friend at the time told me. I came from a good family, had my college degrees, had traveled and filled up my passport book, and yet I was dating a weed head. I dated a drug dealer twice. I dated drug dealers. Why would I do that in my 20s? Wasting myself, knowing that these were not husband materials, knowing it was just fun and games. It wasn't until my 30s that I actually started to come correct and work on my personal character. But you don't have to wait to work on your personal character. Don't buy into society norms of it's okay to sleep around. It's okay to smoke weed and drug your body. Having toxic relationships, being around people that make you want to fight, do ugly things. This is how you can waste your time and waste your fertility and wind up not having a baby until far later in life. Take care of yourself. Take care of your body. Be selective with your heart, your mind, your soul, and your private parts. You live a good life starting today.
What's your first impression from that?
I would say she's speaking from her experience, and I find it really interesting that she said in her 30s, that's when things started to click for her, because once you're like 29, 30, that's when you experience your Saturn return. And
What meaning?
So basically the planet Saturn that's moving in the sky will move and be at the same exact place as Saturn in your birth chart. And this is definitely a time of restructure,
rebirth,
alignment. It can feel like a rebirth sometimes because it's a wake-up call. Mm-hmm. It's a big reality check with people having to realize what's working in their lives and what isn't. And this can be a moment where people grow up. People tend to call Saturn returns your usher or your transition into adulthood. Like that's when you become, a real adult, when you experience Saturn.
So it's not when the bills hit.
I would say there's a big difference from your 30s and your 20s. I will say 20s is definitely a rough decade for life. 20s is definitely a rough decade. But I would say that things might not really fully click until you get to that point. I mean, sometimes it will sooner. Sometimes people have phenomenal Saturn returns, but sometimes people get rocked during their Saturn returns. But it's definitely like moments of realization with, what you want to do with your life. Saturn also is the planet of responsibilities. It's the planet of commitments. This could also be a time where people start to realize, like, am I in the right relationship? A lot of astrologers tend to say that you probably shouldn't get married before your Saturn return. I feel like you can do whatever you want, but there is sometimes moments of realization once you hit your Saturn return, if you are in the right partnership or you're in the right experience for what you want to do in life and how you want to move forward.
So you're saying, just making sure I'm understanding, that a lot of astrologers say you shouldn't get married essentially to about 29, 30 years old?
It tends to be a discourse in the astrology world. I do hear that pretty often, but I would say most astrologers do tend to feel like people should do whatever they want.
Will.
It's free will, I will say fate will take its course.
Fuck around and find out, essentially.
But I will say there are people that do say that like your level of responsibility and how you view commitment and how you view your life, it does change around that time. So sometimes you might not have that level of full maturity or a fuller maturity to realize that maybe this isn't the right relationship or, why you got into the relationship in the first place. Sometimes people do things based off of impulse, or they might feel like obligation, and obligation is definitely a Saturnian thing. And this can be a moment where we decide to realign in terms of our obligation. What do we want to do? How do we want to live? And sometimes people realize that they might want to quit their job and move across the country, or the person that they've known for their whole life might be the one for them. So it's definitely that moment where you start to have these realizations where you feel like you need to get your shit together.
Which makes sense, and why we have a lot of people complaining about wasting their time in their 20s, and they, like her, they sit there and they reflect at a point where it's like, well, damn, I messed up. And that's why I do also think that we definitely need a solid foundation in that early adulthood, that 18, 21-year-old mark, because you're just experiencing things and you actually don't actually you're not actually thinking about the outcomes, the long-term play. A lot of people, not everybody, of course.
No, that's true though.
Especially like, women like her who are just dating drug dealers and getting high. And now she's saying she's 46 with her
didn't
baby.
say she was getting high.
I think she said
She didn't say
something
that.
about weed.
She said, well,
I think she said they were selling the
selling-
weed.
Oh, okay.
But she also said for women not to get high and sleep around, which I'm going to assume that's what she was also doing because she was trying to speak from her own experience
I
without
actually
saying
don't
it.
know. Was she just speaking to women?
Yeah.
I think so.
Oh, okay.
Because she was her whole thing is about being pregnant, having her first pregnancy over the age of 40.
She's 47 now, right?
Yeah, or 46 or 47.
So she probably had her like 45.
Yeah.
There are some people that are meant to have children when they're older. Sometimes people have them younger. Sometimes people have, children different age ranges in their lives. But you can also see in a chart or get an idea of when people will have their first child. But I feel like she needed to, get that moment of clarity. And Saturn returns are definitely big on that. But the 20s is definitely the decade to kind of fuck up. I mean, you can choose, any time in your life to fuck up, but it tends to happen a lot during your 20s because there's a lot of things going on.
Can you look at my chart and tell me if I got any more kids coming? Because I need to be aware now.
We can do that after the show.
I need to see how many more kids is on the way. Because
Is Saturn return only 29, 30? Is it like every cusp?
Every 30 years. So you can have a Saturn return when you're like close to your 90s or in your 90s.
What's the return when it's 39, 40 or like 49, 50? Is it
It
Saturn?
would be more like 59, 60, but yeah, that would be Saturn returning to that same moment. But every planet except Neptune and Pluto can have a return in somebody's lifetime if they live long enough.
Okay. Interesting.
I would say relationships have been going through a lot over the past couple of years.
here specifically,
For sure.
what we're talking about. No, I'm just saying for
America. Yeah, America
It's actually
specifically.
not just here. That's the thing.
No, I mean like
It is in other
based on the
places.
chart that she's speaking of, she's referencing to here.
I actually never considered this hypothesis, but to consider this from the perspective of like evolution and how it's really survival of the fittest at this point it makes a lot of sense. And I actually do it. I would love to like hear what y'all think, if y'all think that this could be like a turning point in evolution, where if you don't have it together, you don't have the skills to get a mate, then you're just gonna be alone and it's gonna be what it is, versus calling it a male epidemic, a loneliness epidemic or whatever.
I feel like that's been always happening, to be honest with you.
Exactly.
Like it's always been since like the end of like the beginning of time.
So, and it also made me revisit why people got married in the first place. Because at one point, only men who could provide financially for a family were the ones who had wives. Everybody else was out here wifeless and being a loser. And I think in order to not being a loser, but wifeless. But in order to make sure men had wives, there were certain things that our society was indoctrinated with to sort of support that. Meaning, let me think. It being a part of like the church, or having it to where women could not survive without a man. So that meant now, if you have half the species who can't survive without you, it really increases your chances of having a wife. And so now that these things have changed, it really does speak to like an evolutionary transformation where we are right now. I think that women are probably complaining because it is a lot to deal with, but overall, like, would I give up the ability to have 75% of the rights that men have in order to go back to the bullshit that my grandmother had to be a part of? Fuck no. Like, I don't see why any person with a brain would want to do that. No. I think that you see women complaining and just saying, "Oh, let me just marry somebody and be done with this." I don't think that women would be willing to give up what has come in the last 60 years or 50 years to go back to being under a man's thumb.
I would say most women, absolutely. There are some women that
Some. And those are aberrations. Let's not mix the two. Generally, I do not think American women, and even women who have come here and have been a part of our society and may not be necessarily American, I think that they're of the same mindset too.